Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. Hello and welcome to Perinatal Wellbeing episode number 23. Today, Gillian Cullen, founder and CEO of Birthmark, joins me to talk about starting Birthmark, a charity dedicated to providing full-spectrum doula support for marginalized and at-risk communities throughout the GTA and Hamilton. Gillian started Birthmark from the ground up and is doing incredible work in the community to raise awareness, advocate for better care of those in the perinatal period, and provide amazing doula care access to people in underserved communities. Hi, Gillian. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so excited because I want us to talk about kind of community support, grassroots organizations. I mean, I guess more so, the lack of access to support that we find in this province.
Yes.
Specifically, and kind of have you on because you are the founder and CEO of Birthmark.
Yes, yeah. So definitely noticed that there was a huge gap as a survivor of domestic violence and growing up in a neighborhood that was really underserved. When I heard what doulas were, which was quite a few years ago now, I went into my first training. And my goal was to, expand services to folks or work at a shelter or a community health center, and quickly found out that there's nobody doing that work. And there's no funding for it. So I still wanted to be a doula.
Yeah.
I was, just about to start planning for my fourth child. And so I took the training, and it was like, okay, this is great. Like, now we can support people who don't have people or may have a small pool of people that won't be able to really give them the guidance they need through any type of reproductive event. I always knew I was a doula. I was always that person that my friends would call when they became pregnant, whether they were going to continue with the pregnancy or not. It was like a calling for me. So when I had the opportunity, I worked in very high-end high profile clients. And I thought, I'm just going to tell everybody about it. This is my dream. This is what I want to do. Yeah. And through that, I was able to find some funding to start Birthmark.
Wow, that's amazing. And can I ask, did you have doula support when you had your kids? No way.
I did not. And because of my domestic violence situation, I was very alone. And even the people that were in my circle, like my mother and friends, I didn't make them aware of how alone I was, and exactly what I was going through. So that's why when I was thinking back, like having somebody who is really there, that's going to come in and help with like no bias and being really concentrated on my needs, it would have been so helpful. And I think that we could have, created more of like a community together. And I was young too. And I think that's another factor of, especially being a young parent, you don't really want people's advice. Yeah. That's one thing, being a teenager and in general, never mind being a pregnant teenager. So being a young parent, like we kind of formed our own community growing up, and like we did have each other to help with respite and like talk through things, but like having a professional who is the expert in reproductive care would have been really super helpful.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely.
And then with my last birth, I did, because I was a doula, it was very planned. I ended up not being very well, and I was in the hospital for a very long time with my fourth child. I was kind of my own doula. So I didn't really need that support. Plus my partner ended up taking a postpartum doula course as well. So he was helping a lot of parents at Birthmark, like after we started Birthmark, but really learned what a postpartum support person looks like.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. So how many years ago was that you started Birthmark?
So we started in July of 2018.
Okay.
So, and I didn't know anything about starting a charity.
Right.
I learned along the way.
Yeah.
And what I did is I took a course at the University of Toronto, part-time course, just to really understand governance and how charities operate with boards. And we started our nonprofit. We started with a nonprofit status and then went through a charity application with a fabulous team of lawyers that really focus on charity law.
Right.
And we were able to get that application in, and we were officially, it takes time for them to process it, but they go back to your application date. So we were officially a charity as of August 2018.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was quite a wonderful thing to see this happen, and knowing that we were one of the first to do that as a doula organization in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were the barriers for you getting started with Birthmark?
Definitely, like understanding, like we had to start like operational processes, understanding what community, like how we were going to receive clients to make sure it's done in a really equitable way. So we wanted to make sure that the dollars that were going directly to the clients that really could not, had multiple barriers to accessing doula care. And also we were not taking food out of doula's mouths. So there's like these two big pillars of like, how are we going to be an organization that is equitably receiving the clients, but also making sure that our doula profession people were still getting paid in a private way. And knowing that like insurance doesn't cover, like it's starting to change a little bit. Insurance mostly does not cover doula care. And then the folks that do have private insurance probably already have ways of gaining, either with a sliding scale, or they may have supports in their lives or a job that would allow them to be able to pay even on a sliding scale basis.
Right.
So that was definitely the thing that we really wanted to focus on in the beginning.
Right.
And how we went about that is by reaching out to organizations and individuals that are already working with the client base that we were looking to serve. We created some criteria, but it was also really important that a lot of the folks that we're serving have had to tell their story and be re-traumatized by our services that are available, right? And by our system. So we wanted to be the place where they could come in and tell us as little or as much information as they wanted. And they didn't have to prove themselves that they were worthy of getting our services. So we rely very, very heavily on our community partners that are onboarded to refer the clients that fit within those criteria without any proof. And then the doulas get to start their relationship with their clients on a very like equal basis, and not that client can decide whether they want to share parts of their story or not.
Right, right. Wow. So it sounds like you found the funding model to support that system you want to create of like supporting doulas, supporting the community. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. And then we really wanted to make sure that we're hiring doulas that really want to do this work, because it can be really taxing. It can be very intensive, and we needed to make sure that we are giving doulas to folks that would not cause further harm, especially because our system is quite harmful. So
absolutely. And so how many of you were there at the beginning? Like
there was 6 of us.
Wow.
And I found it's funny because I knew doulas from working in agencies and in the community. So I approached them first. And then I just started to really like go online and look at like Facebook doula groups and Facebook posts and like, oh, this person's talking about the things that really connect with what our goals are,
Right.
and really fall in line with our core values that we created in the first couple of weeks of starting Birthmark. It's like, what are our core values and how are we going to move through this? And how are we going to ensure that we are holding our core values as the main way that we communicate with people, we work with clients, and we communicate with community.
Right. And so do you mind sharing what are those core values that have led you in this work?
Yeah. So they have changed over the years.
Absolutely.
Currently, community care,
Okay.
inclusivity, respect, relationships, integrity, social justice, and continuous learning. So all of these are really, really based in what we're doing now. In 2020, we started to do some equity auditing of our services, and this is what led us. We started to work through each and every one of our documents that were created in the beginning, and work with a PR company that was really supportive of helping us learn and grow. We also entered into a lens of to make sure that anti-racism and anti-oppression was really threaded throughout our core values. And we found that these words were more relatable to exactly what we were doing today, instead of what we started with in 2018, and how the world has definitely changed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't think the world is changing. And we're trying to create a safer and better place for our clients and our doulas and our community at whole, in whole. And then also like what our work looks like that is different from the beginning.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how has it shifted and changed? Like, what's it like now?
Well, there is almost 70 of us.
Wow.
We have offices in 2 cities. So we serve the Greater Toronto area as well as Hamilton. And we are always looking for funding to expand those services and create more opportunities, but also like really listening to the other doula collectives that are popping up that want to do the same work and not repeat the same services that are out there. So really we pay attention to what programming is out there. How are we going to fill the gaps as doulas? And then, adding programs that really enhance that care. So in the beginning, it was just doula care, birth and postpartum. Now we have a donation center called Joanna's Giving Wall, which is named after one of our original 6 doulas who passed away from cancer, who was already doing this work, but not getting paid for it. So, and that was another big thing for Birthmark is like, we need to get paid. How are we going to make sure that we're paid for being a doula, but do it in a charity way? So like raising money to do that and pay our doulas a living wage. And then we also have our naturopathic doctor who does clinic in Toronto every Wednesday. We have massage therapy, we have cranial sacral therapy, and we have a ton of online programming for prenatal education. So, and then that's free to our clients, but also for a small fee to the community to raise money. We just launched our very first training, doula training, which is the abortion doula training, which is super exciting. We're almost done with our first cohort. So that has been incredible. And we really took our time to ensure that we are covering everything we can. Support, anti-oppression, and then layers of law and coverage measures, which we found was very hard. A lot of doula trainings don't cover all of the things. You can get pieces from all over in different trainings. So it was really important as we launched our first training to make sure that was done. So it's been, and then of course we have our abortion doula support. So, and we do loss support as well. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of clients come through in the last few weeks, last couple of years because of the layer of COVID too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible supports that you guys offer. And I'm curious, how did you really connect with the community to be able to reach the people that need to access or want to access these services?
So it was a lot of cold calling. a lot of knocking on many, many doors and inviting the programs that already exist. And because once we started to get people to hear us and listen, we were very quickly moved. Like they're like, oh, I know somebody else who wants this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that this hasn't happened before. Oh my God. So it was really word of mouth. It was us going out into the community, doing a ton of presentations.
Right.
And it took a little while for us to be taken seriously. And then we had to really prove to them, right? So yes, you're going to send your clients, you're going to refer your clients to us, but we needed to prove to them that these services are actually what we were saying they were. And that was the part of making sure that our doulas come in and they're onboarded and they understand our core values, and then they go out and work with our clients in a way that was really filling gaps and not trying to take other services that were already doing these things. Right. Why spend our funding on things that already exist?
Exactly.
Right. So yeah. So it was a lot of presentations, a lot of slideshows, a lot of us constantly talking to people and networking, and then the service. So our doulas worked really hard, showed up for our clients, and then that agency or that organization would tell another person. And it started us really working, instead of working in silos, which a lot of organizations are still doing. We're a part of a lot of working groups and networking groups. But really start thinking about how we can help navigate those systems as well. And that's one thing that I think we've done that have made us grown so quickly as well, is that we're like, oh, wait a minute, we know these other services. Let's sit down at a table and figure out how we can work together for this client. Right. What other services are you involved in? Do you need help to communicate with them or to get to these things, or even just have somebody beside you that is a different type of relationship than the other services that are really focused on one particular part of their journey.
Right. And when we're working together, then we are helping to serve more people. We're helping even the people that we do serve, we're helping to offer them more support, right?
And more community, right? Yeah. Because if there's other clients, if they're going to these other classes or groups, or it's starting to help folks create their own community and connect with each other and not feel so isolated and alone, which has been one of the major things, especially going through any part of a reproductive event and you're new to the country, or you're dealing with some other life circumstance, or you don't have the people that a lot of our community has, or a lot of other communities have. It starts to build your own community, and that isolation piece starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller in your life.
Absolutely. And so 2018 you launched, and then 2 years later a pandemic hit. What was that like for you guys?
Oh, so it was we felt it coming, and because we're doulas, we're like, okay, let's do all the research we can. And the first thing I thought, okay, I have a feeling lockdown is going to happen. I have a feeling that this is all the buzz, what's happening in the other countries that are a little bit ahead of us, definitely will impact us. So the first thing I did was, we need infection control. If we are going to be able to continue to serve our clients, who a lot of them were alone, which means going into these hospital spaces completely alone. We need to make sure we can prove to the communities that we're serving and to the healthcare providers that we're ready, and we're ready to do this in a way that will be supportive of it and not hinder what's happening in their worlds. So we booked an infection control training. We had an in-person infection control training on the Wednesday. Right. And we went into the lockdown on the Friday.
Wow. Holy, talk about ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was quite the adventure. It was perfect timing. And then we've always had prerequisite training courses for our doulas to take within the first year of service with us. And then so we added that on. What that did is, some of the healthcare providers were like, okay, that's great, you can come on in. But it was a lot for folks to take in. We also provided each and every one of our doulas that were still working in person with an infection control kit, which included all medical grade disinfection products. I had to learn how to write policy.
Oh yes.
So that was that was definitely something I was not expecting to do. And we've spent many, many hours. Even now, we're constantly upgrading and changing our policies around that as we get more information. But it enabled us to continue to work in person. Some of our doulas did go into a virtual capacity, depending, and we let them choose.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to decide for you whether you feel comfortable or not. I don't know what's going on in your life, the people you have to take care of. But we also had to recognize that a lot of our doulas that do this work are also, single parents.
Right.
How are we going to support these folks that are now losing out on the funds that they've planned for by working with our clients? So it was a lot of navigating and understanding and talking to our individual doulas to understand what their particular needs were. And then, of course, with with all the rules and regulations that came out with that first lockdown, really understanding, do we fit in to continue to do in-person support? So at that time, I was vice president for the Association of Ontario Doulas. So I was working on policy in that realm and the policy in our birthmark realm. And it was, and being home myself with 4 children.
Oh my gosh.
And, being I have autoimmune issues. So also trying to protect myself as much as I can to get through it so I can stay healthy and keep supporting my team and my family and my association. But we were deemed, because we're a nonprofit, we were deemed to be able as an essential service.
Okay. Right.
So we were still able to do in-person support depending on the policies of the places that we were serving. So we could still go into the homes. Shelters were a little bit different depending on the need and the individual shelter. And then hospitals, we did a lot of advocating and letter writing and phone calls. And we even started a weekly informational I think it was on Zoom or Instagram, I can't remember now, one of them, where we would actually call the hospitals every week. And every single hospital in Toronto and Hamilton, and say, what is your policy? What are your policies around NICU? What are your policies around support people? What are your policies? Some weeks we would say we were from Birthmark. Some weeks we would pretend we were a pregnant person, depending on how we could extract that information. And then share it with the public at large. So it didn't have to be Birthmark clients. It could be anybody, because anybody who was especially having a baby at that time, every day there was something changing. So we really encouraged folks to still reach out and figure out what the policies are. But we really wanted to try to give some information weekly on what what was happening back then. So
wow, that's incredible. Wow.
It was a whirlwind.
I bet. Yeah. And what is the impact that you and, the doulas in the organization saw on pregnant people, birthing people during the pandemic?
Definitely added stressors, income was so many more people needed support and weren't able to work. Single parents who were already at home and then birthing, how are we supporting them? What services are still open, right? So we have other organizations we work with for respite and childcare, especially for folks who need childcare for when they were having their babies. So it was really about pivoting and trying to figure out what the individual needed. Mental health and isolation, huge impact. We did have more loss, definitely a lot more loss. And then also our doulas, our doulas trying to stay safe and healthy. And also remembering that there's a big vaccine push, and making sure that our core values were upheld within our team and within our clients around making sure you have a body autonomy, which is a big thing. So making sure that the doulas who wanted the vaccine, how were we going to advocate and be included in the healthcare, the essential healthcare workers. So we did a lot of advocating around for the doulas that really wanted and needed the vaccine in the beginning, early days. we advocated with so many different hospital systems and government systems and our locals and our, national. I emailed everybody that we possibly could.
Amazing.
And we ended up being able to get included with Unity Health, which is in Toronto, St. Joe's and St. Mike's.
Yep.
And we were included in their first round. So we were able to get any of the doulas that wanted the vaccine vaccinated very early on in the first rollout for essential healthcare workers. So that was great. But at the same time, it's this thing where it's like this perfect balance. We wanted to make sure that the doulas that did not want to get vaccine and do have mistrust of the systems also felt supported. So making sure we provided them with all the information we could, the kits, and making sure that they understood that this was never going to be a standard for our organization. And that was super important to make sure that they heard that message. And how do we go to our clients and say, we want to support your body autonomy, and then say, oh, guess what? We can't serve you if you're not vaccinated, or your doulas are being forced into vaccination.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was definitely something that was a little bit harder to navigate for a process, but we were able to get through it. And now, make sure our clients, when they're being intake, do you want a doula with the vaccine? Do you, making sure that they had that choice, and then assigning the doulas properly to them.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And did you have a lot, or many clients that weren't able to have their doula if they were birthing in hospital? Yeah. What was that?
And we still and it really depends. It's so different from who's on shift, who's their nurse, who their doctor is.
Yeah.
Especially in a hospital, it was definitely every day, every client, every doula had different experiences.
Something different.
Yeah. And we were able to advocate to have, especially for cases that had very lots of complex layers. We were able to really have advocate through the social workers or through hospital administrators to have our doulas accompany on top of already one support person.
Amazing.
So for those more complex cases, we were able to, and that really was a beautiful thing of starting relationships more so with the hospitals,
right,
who are now more aware of doula care and what doula care can look like from all different angles, from, private doula care to now, we like to call it community doula care. Right. So, but the people who were alone, we were able to go in with them right from the beginning. We started to we bought ID makers. So each of our doulas have their own ID.
Nice.
And we were able to start relationships with the individual hospitals and really try to put the same doulas in the same hospital. So they were starting to be recognized and understand, oh, this is a birthmark doula coming in. We know that this is a different type of circumstance. And I think too, they felt more supported. A lot of the nurses were like, oh, these people really know what they're doing. I can really concentrate on the health of the baby and the birthing person, and let this doula take care of the emotional and physical needs during the process. And especially the emotional piece, being, first of all, some folks would have their whole family or their partner ends up getting allergies or COVID, and then they're not going to come, or their support person. So I was on call. I said, anytime you get blocked at that door, you call me and I will be the first person down there to make sure that my doulas are getting in and my clients are supported.
Yes.
And I never had to. There's been a couple phone calls that I've had to make, but I've never had to physically go down there and be like, what are you talking about this person not coming in?
Let them in.
Human rights. Right. Yeah. You want me to quote the code because I'm ready to go.
And which is so amazing. When you're talking, I'm just thinking about, no matter how modern we are and how digital we are now, especially post-COVID, right? But those face-to-face relationships, how important they really are. Building community, building support, getting to know people, these are the supports we offer, and this is what a doula is, and gaining that trust from each other. It's incredible.
And I think our team, as much as we're we haven't been in person for so long, we're just starting to, start thinking about like having in-person meetings again. And like, we did see it was a little harder for us to connect as a team.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was, we were like pre-COVID, all of our team meetings were in person. We would have like cuddle puddles is what I like to say it. Like everybody's hugging and touching because we're doulas. That's what we love. We love that touch and that connection. So like now we're just starting to think about like, how do we rebuild that again? How do we get back to those places where we can lean on each other? Because this work is really, it's really hard on your soul. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your psyche. It's hard on your families. So like, how do we start leaning on each other in that way again? And it's really hard to do in a virtual capacity when you're a caregiver who loves, you know, that connection and in-person connection. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Where touch is so important. And yeah, now I'm like navigating the awkwardness of like meeting someone for the first time in person. It's like, are we shaking hands?
Yeah.
Are we not? Like, I'm a handshaker. Like, do we shake hands? And that, you know, or if you know, get together as friends or something, like, are we hugging? Are we not hugging? What's happening?
Are we masking? Are we not?
Yeah,
masking?
we're not masking.
Like,
Yeah, it's like all these new, you know, social situations. It's so strange.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, you know, like, we have like a group of doulas that haven't stopped. So they haven't seen as much as the doulas that have like come back virtual and in person or taken time off.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time, like we start doing those things. But, you know, the one thing we did learn and we have grown from is like making sure we always had anti-oppression on our prerequisites, but like really, really breaking it down and helping our clients understand how the impacts of COVID-19 have affected different communities, because we have to be really cognizant of that. All of us have had very different experiences through this pandemic, but there has been communities that have been hit and impacted way harder. And, you know, some of our doulas are not from those communities. So really helping them. And then the doulas who are or have experienced them have to really think about like the impacts on our clients and how we are now processing that information ourselves, right? Are we triggered when we're seeing these things happen in our communities, and how we can process that? So we've added grief literacy, we've added anti-Blackness at the intersections, we've added anti-oppression, we've added an Indigenous birthing training. So we have all of these tools to really help. And then Olivia Scobie has done a beautiful training for specifically for Birthmark around you know, helping folks with birth trauma or trauma in general, and how that impacts the birthing or reproductive processes, which I think a lot of our doulas, we come into this work because we want to help people who may have similar circumstances to our own. So really trying to work through some of those triggers that will, I'm not going to say can, because they will pop up when we work with our communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important to like own our own stuff and be able to kind of take care of ourselves through that, recognize when things pop up. Because like you said, they do pop up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so important. Right. And then we know we can show up to be the best version of ourselves for the people we're serving. Right.
Exactly. And know when to step back. So we know that like, okay, wait, do I need support on this? Do I need to bring another doula in on this? Do I need to have a call with one of the people on our team to kind of process it, so there's not the further harm happening with our clients? That's one thing I talk about so much, is like, folks have been through so much stuff. Let's not be another thing for them to go through. You know?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so what has been the impact, and I'm sure continues to be the impact from COVID-19 on the communities that you serve?
So definite financial impacts, more food insecurity, isolation is number one.
Yeah.
Isolation is the thing that we know has happened. People who are living in pre-COVID, if you're living in a congregate living setting, so example is like a supportive housing or a shelter, a lot of the times people who were in that system would come together and have meals together and create relationships and community within those spaces. And when COVID hit, everybody was being sent out to the different hotels or different places where they weren't together, or they were told to stay in their own space. So knowing that they're like, oh, I'm getting an apartment. That's really great. It's exciting. I'm getting out of the shelter. But now you're in an apartment that is 2-hour walk to the closest grocery store.
Right.
So that's brand new baby, just given birth, whatever the situation is now you are so much more isolated.
Right.
Services aren't readily available for you. There's less and less the overwhelm in the mental health services that are really needed, especially like if you're navigating any type of trauma, which a lot of us are. So it's longer wait times to get into these places, finding doctors, finding resources, what programs are actually open and what programs are closed. It was really creating an awful, awful space for folks to be super, super isolated in already an isolating time, especially when you're having a baby.
Absolutely.
So like we did, we've had some loss. One of our clients, there was Flora's Walk this year, which was a beautiful day of remembering Flora. Well, Flora was one of our clients at Birthmark that struggled very much so with postpartum psychosis. The big triggers, really the things that happened after our services ended, because there wasn't somebody there constantly to kind of like break away from that isolation. Unfortunately, Flora lost her battle to postpartum psychosis. And I hate to say, suicide, but because it was a battle for her.
Absolutely.
Right. And she lost her battle to it. And it's something I that impacted a lot of us here very deeply. And it just helps us realize like how much this work is needed, but that isolation piece and feeling alone is definitely the biggest impact. And that's why I'm so excited to start trying to get more in-person stuff happening. Our online stuff is great, but that also creates a barrier to accessing, right? Not everybody has data, not everybody has a cell phone. And now if you don't get that community. And even if you do, it's like a lot of the times people are trying to feed a baby or go through something or have to work or all these things that come up. It's just the virtual space is not for everybody. So
absolutely. And I just want to hold space for you and everyone at the organization that, is still dealing with the aftermath kind of what happened with Flora and, honoring her and her journey. And it's heavy. It's so hard.
It is. And, she was very much involved in all of our services. A lot of our team knew her. And it was almost a shock to us because we didn't find out until Flora's Walk was announced that she had passed. So we were already included as one of the beneficiaries for Flora's Walk. And then it was actually our EG Patisse, who is incredible. She does a lot of our intake work, right? So she was like, wait a minute, I know that name.
Right.
And that's how we found out. So it was like, we had to break the news to the doula and, and then like also to the other care providers that had worked with her. And she was so excited to be parenting. She was so excited to be parenting and wanted this for so long. So, and that's the thing, it's like, people don't think of or talk about it enough that like, even though you want, like, this is something you desperately want, this is something you desperately want to do, and you're doing it alone, it doesn't mean that you're not going to experience all of the things that come along with being in a postpartum time. Right. So the depression, the psychosis, all of those things, it's not something we choose. It's not about being alone. It's actually something that's physically and mentally happening to our bodies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people who are not in this space, like, this is why I have the podcast. And I'm really hoping that people are not just people that are in this work are listening, to be able to understand that these things are real, right?
Yes.
Like, this happens. The system also failed her.
Very much so.
Failed a lot of people, failed a lot of us as parents and birthing people who've experienced perinatal mood and anxiety disorders.
Yeah. Yes.
So kind of segueing into that,
Yeah.
I know you see it. What do you see as those big, gaps in service, lack of service in this province?
Well, first of all, reproductive care in general
Yeah.
is not. I feel like there's so many people who are like, that's not my forte. If you are a family doctor, if you're a nurse, if you interact with anybody who can become pregnant, anybody that can become pregnant, that has to be something that is noted and taken care of by every medical care provider, from abortion to postpartum care.
Yep.
That 6-week checkup with a gynecologist or OB is not enough.
No,
it's not enough. We should have the supports and visits and conversations and have the services set up to make sure that there are people who are checking in and making sure that they are okay.
absolutely. This is, my hope, and what I try to advocate for is like you said, anyone that interacts with someone who potentially can birth a child and thus be exposed to a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, ask the questions.
Yes.
How are you?
Yes.
Like, really, how are you? Not just like, do you feel ready to resume sexual activity at the 6-week mark? Like, that's
exactly
right.
And even the 6-week mark. Why are we waiting till 6 weeks?
Right.
Why are we waiting to 6 weeks to have those conversations? And, also like creating trusting relationships with patients.
Absolutely.
Right. Because like yes, you can be asked those questions, but if you have the fear of having any type of child protection involvement, you are going to be completely guarded. So this is now subtracting so many folks who are impacted by perinatal mental health, is that I can't talk to my care provider in fear of not being able to parent my child, or having surveillance by a child protection, or having questions like, if I'm not well and I'm experiencing these moods and perinatal mental health issues or illnesses, then I can't really talk about it because I'm not going to be given the supports. They're going to cost me money, or they're not going to be available to me, or I'm going to be judged, or my community already has a history of apprehension. So why would I ever talk about these things and get the help that I need? And then what that does is, this is another generation of children who are going to grow up without connection, maybe. Absolutely. Because their parent wasn't able to get the support they needed after they birthed, after they were birthed. So it's like it's never going to stop until we have systems in place to make sure that people feel safer, because I don't believe in that word safe. I think everybody has their own way of feeling safe, but like having places that they can go and talk freely and get the help they need without the risk of even more implications down the road.
Absolutely. And if we talk about it more, if we open up these discussions again, like even normalizing, right after delivery, if medical providers are like, hey, are you okay? Or how are you? That was intense. There's no acknowledgement. There's no discussion around anything, or like even having a discussion, have the social worker that works in the hospital come in and meet with we're going to need more social workers, but every single, birthing person, like, hey, this is what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders can look like. Watch out for these symptoms. Let's have the discussion.
And you know what? The one thing is that there is a solution to that more doulas in these spaces. So it takes the burden off the social workers as well. We can have these discussions prenatally, postnatally, and after an abortion, which is a lot of the time people don't even think of, right? Like, there is still perinatal mood. After an abortion, your body is still going through those changes, those hormonal changes. Having these discussions prenatally or postnatally, and having doulas within those settings, right? And that's one of my goals as a human being. Maybe not as a birthmark person, because I have to advocate in certain ways as being a charity CEO. But one day when my days are over as being the leader here, is like, how do I help? How does our community help getting doulas into these spaces to fill those gaps, so the social workers can still do their job, and then we can refer and say, you know what, we feel like a social worker could really help us navigate this piece, or another medical care provider, but have those and educate the people who are around them. If they have support people, educate our clients and say, okay, or are the people we're serving, we're supporting, and fill that gap. Because I really truly believe that if we had somebody who was doing like check-ins with folks and saying like, how are you? What are you feeling? Like, and we can be that gap. We can really support folks in that area. I really truly feel like we can.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
in that relational way, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, because absolutely people can ask the question and, not answer, not want, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I don't come from a community that has been oppressed by authority, police, CAS. I have not had those encounters, but
Yeah.
when I experienced postpartum anxiety, I still lied on my assessment and said I
Yes.
didn't have intrusive thoughts because I'm like, well, they're going to think that I'm a bad mom and they're going to take my kid away.
Yeah.
Again, also because of stigma and stereotypes,
Yes.
because we don't talk enough about it. We don't have these discussions enough, right?
Yes.
And so if, for example, if I had a doula or if I had someone explain to me what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders were before I was, having a baby,
Yes.
I would have understood this is normal. This is part of the mental illness. Like, this is
Yeah.
not you, like all those things, right? But absolutely having that relationship where people, especially in communities that don't, calling 911 is not safe or dealing with CAS is not safe. Like, then having those relationships, absolutely, where I always say, like, just tell one person how
Yes.
you're feeling. If you're not feeling well, just tell one person that you feel you can trust,
And having conversations, sometimes it's not going to be like, okay, yeah, I feel fine.
Right.
Right. And then you start talking to somebody and you start having a conversation about like what your day looks like, what's stressing you out. And like being able, oh, wait a minute, that was something that sounds like we should have a deeper discussion around this.
Yes.
Right. And also like culturally competent care,
Mhm.
like being able to have care providers that are going to relate to your own cultural situation or religious situation is super important too. Right. Because if we're all coming in and we can take every training in the world,
Yep.
but there's going to be holes and gaps. So if we can connect with the people from our own communities that will have a better understanding,
Yeah.
and that means like really diversifying our all of these supportive and medical care environments, right? And so it's a bigger system problem,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
the conversations that you can have with a doula after building a relationship may help people really start hearing themselves, either like, oh my gosh, I just caught that because I understand and I'm educated on what perinatal mental health illnesses look like, um, or perinatal mental health in general, or having your trained person to be there beside you. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to start asking deeper questions
Right.
to see if this person needs extra supports.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not agree more. And so actually maybe something we should have done at the beginning, that I
Yeah.
should have asked if I was more of a professional podcast interviewer. Why don't you explain for people? I took it for granted because I know what a doula does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you explain for listeners who actually have not ever had a doula or, don't know about doula services, what do doulas do for people in this space?
Okay, so doulas are like the term that a lot of folks use, are like educational, emotional, and physical support. So really what that looks like is very individualized to the person who is getting the services, and what kind of level they want. Educational is my favorite, right?
Yeah.
We are not given any information as we go through any type of reproductive event.
Right.
So being able to pull the information for the specific person on what they need to, so asking the questions, what are you wondering about, what are your biggest fears around your event that's about to happen, and then really being able to pull the information that relates directly to what they're looking for. And then as they move through, their situation is going to change, right? Things will change all the time. So being able to find that information and help in an unbiased way. So we're doing a lot of research all the time.
Mhm.
I like to say, like Google Maps
Yes.
for
Reproductive health.
reproductive health, right? So we're going to help you decide which route's going to be
Mhm.
the one for you and your body and you as an individual.
Mhm.
And then the physical support is hands-on, right? So like whether it's abortion, pregnancy, labor, and postpartum, being able to help people physically cope with all of the different tools that we have in our tool bags for that. So physical tools or non-physical tools, right? That's like what does that individual need? And the emotional piece is really like listening, always listening. And from that point, moving into seeing like what other supports they need to get through their event. Right. So we don't do anything medical besides give information that is unbiased or research. But we do not do any like physical checks or testing or diagnose you with anything,
right?
Which is super important in our profession.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we there's so many different scopes of practice. We're unregulated profession. Right. So I feel like, especially over the last couple of years, our profession is changing quite drastically. But it's really about being that person that is going to stay by you and hear you and not put our own biases into what you want, and really help navigate that system beside you as a support person that is truly there for you and not there for anybody else.
Right. And it's not just like they're at the birth and, supporting you through delivery, right? There's so much more that doula support encompasses, as you described, which I think is so helpful. And again, understanding that it's the whole spectrum of reproductive events. Abortion support, right? Pregnancy loss, delivery, post-delivery, all those things. It's so important because we do need support through all of those things.
And it's so funny because like so many people focus on the birth piece, right? Like I need a doula because I got to get through labor and delivery, and like I need a doula there. But I truly feel it's like when you're alone with that baby for the first time. So scary. And you're like, I have to keep this human alive. Nobody's given me, and like people forget about that piece. And that's where I feel like we get to make a big impact, is really just being able to say, oh my gosh, this is hard. Feeding, nobody knows. Come on, now I got to body feed this baby who's never body fed before. Exactly. If it's your first baby, you've never body fed before. So like that piece alone, or even just navigating feeding in general. How am I going to eat? How is my baby going to be bottle fed? Okay. How do I even do that properly? How is like that information is not readily available for folks. And the system is waiting for us to fail. Oh yes. The system is waiting for us to fail, and we don't even have the tools to be successful, to be honest.
Absolutely. That's definitely the case, because we, look at the challenges that people face and, things that contribute to, especially in postpartum, like postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. And for example, feeding is huge, right? I mean, I'm biased because that was my issue. But there, again, no support. Just like I was just given, here, take domperidone, take medication to boost your supply and figure it out. Like what? Like that's,
and then there's no feeding support out there that doesn't cost money. Exactly. Right. So now we're saying like, oh, feed your baby, breast is best, body feed. But I'm not going to give you free support. So you're going to have to now go on a wait list. And by the time, you're able to get the free support at this clinic, your going to have to get there. You're already your baby's starving. You're exhausted, so I think it's literally, and then there you go. You're flung right into, anxiety and absolutely depression, and you're exhausted. So you're already not sleep. Like so many things happen where we could just get ahead of that and just have the services and call to our government to say, okay, this should be included for every single person who's giving birth.
Absolutely.
Every single parent that decides to parent needs to be able to have access to these supports and not have to wait for doctor's appointments and beg for support, because that's pretty much what we have to do at this point.
Exactly. And the problem in that is, what if you don't know what supports are there, right? Like we talked about navigating the system. If you don't even know what's available, what's possible, you don't know what to ask for. And again, that piece of like, shame, embarrassment, oppression, racism. How do I ask for these things if I don't feel comfortable with my healthcare provider? Right.
Yeah.
And so it has big impacts on us, which again, I don't think we talk about enough. I don't think people outside of the perinatal field, like birth workers and therapists and, all the people that work with, in the perinatal field, I don't think outside of that, we talk about it enough.
Agreed. Yes. And it's like, how do we get policymakers?
Right.
How do we get our government to like start hearing that? But that's the sad thing is that, our society is still based around one person and, and one type of people. And until that is starting to break down, people won't even hear. So we're trying to raise noise as much as we can, and really like start educating. And I think that's where we need to start, is like the education piece, like talk about it. Everybody needs to talk about it all the time until they're sick and tired of hearing about it, because then we might start seeing that change. And it has to be everybody. It can't just be the people working in our field. It has to be all genders, all people, from all communities, really starting to raise their voices and come together instead of us trying to do these things in silos.
Absolutely. And that, I think too, I mean, it's kind of incredible to see like these grassroots organizations like yourselves, right? Coming up and doing this work because of the lack of services, the lack of support, the lack of government funding, which, side note, your organization doesn't have any government funding, does it?
None. The only funding we have is through like small grants. So like we have the youth summer job program. So we are able during the summer or during other times of the year, hire folks and they'll pay their wages or pay a portion of their wages. And like this year we brought on 12 different supports during the summer, which is exciting. It's the most we ever, like, I didn't think we were going to get approved for all 12 positions. So it was kind of a really quick hire. And they don't give you much notice after you get approval, which is fun with government funding. So this year we actually have a lobbyist who started today, who's going to start, really starting to educate the community around perinatal mental health and around perinatal journey and abortion, and invite some of these policy and change makers into our space, but also being able to like have like office support staff and these people, so we can then take a step back and start doing a little bit more of that work during the summer. And then also giving some folks some time off, because that's important when we're working in an administrative way. It's not just like we're hearing so many from different stories, right? So we're holding a lot of space. We may not be doing a lot of face-to-face. A lot of our admin team still does birth work, but a lot of them don't do the postpartum work because there's no time for it with all the things we have going on. So we really want to start making some noise and letting people know what we're doing and start getting more funding so we can expand services and continue the work that we're doing from this point on.
Absolutely amazing. And can people make like individual donations if they went to the website?
Right on our website, how you can help. It says donate here. We have some prompts there to let you know what your dollars will cover. Every single donation goes right back into our services. So you can go onto our website and make a donation, and we do have some prompts of exactly what is covered by certain dollar donations. We're always looking for diapers, wipes, that type of thing. So we do have an Amazon wish list, which I think is also on our website. Amazing. So there's like, especially with a lot of the places that our clients are coming from, it's really hard to access those things. So we love to diapers and wipes are always needed. And then also like you can sponsor like a doula training for We have a scholarship program where it's a very short process if you want to become a doula, but really recognizing the fact that sometimes just a doula training is the obstacle or the barrier to becoming a doula, especially when we want to think about communities that have been underserved or may not have the resources, and we want a diverse team. We want not just our team, but doulas in general.
Yes.
We need diversity in this profession to make sure that people can get the care that they want and deserve, and that they can trust.
Yes.
A lot more, right? So like if somebody comes and takes a training or gets a scholarship with us, I don't expect you to come work on our team. Probably would love you to come work on our team. But definitely just to have more doulas out there doing this work is really great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways. We have fundraisers happening. You'll hear more about us over the next few months as we have decided to, try to step up and be in the public eye a little bit more. So you may be hearing more about some of our adventures in the next few months for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. And I will put everything in the show notes. I will link everything in the show notes so that people can click on those links to go and donate. And of course, on social media, I always like to share your programs and services for the community for sure. And so just also, I wanted to kind of ask just in terms of what is doula services? And also, can you tell us, I know we covered a lot of them, but like the benefits of having a doula support you?
Yeah, so definitely feeling less isolated.
Yes.
Big one.
Yeah.
Being able to understand what programs and services that are available for you in your community. There are some statistical things like, decreasing the time of your labor and, being able to body feed in a way that feels good for your family. We do have facility services as well. So like we just started for our trans and queer programming, the Seed and Sprout, which is for 2S LGBTQIA family programming. We just added a layer of fertility doulas to that as well. So I forgot to talk about that earlier, so I just wanted to throw it in there. So being able to really get and understand the rights you have around reproductive care, what you have available options, those are all the things that I feel are the biggest benefits. It's almost like having a professional best friend. You can tell whatever you want to, and we as doulas should hold that and help you navigate whatever is coming up.
Absolutely. And like in that, like that education piece, right? Talking about it, asking the questions, having the safe place. I mean, that can look like
safer.
Place to ask those questions, to feel like you can get an unbiased answer, researched answer, and then make that decision for yourself.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And then being connected to people who also, I know you have the Seed and Sprout program with monthly meetings, right?
We have all sorts of different programs with under that umbrella, right? So we have fertility groups, we have solo parent groups, we have events that happen, and we're really like, that program is super special to us, and we really want to expand as much as we can. And we also have doulas that are specifically part of the Seed and Sprout team. So we have queer and trans doulas on our team that are ready to support for families in that community.
Absolutely. So I like to ask this question. I know it's hard and layered and complicated, but what would you like to see change in this space, in this community, especially in terms of doula work and doula support in the communities you serve?
I would love doulas to be a part of everybody's journey in the medical care system, for us to be included in every space. And so you always know you have an advocate. You always know you have somebody who is here to listen to your needs and help you communicate them, because that is the problem, I think, with our system, is that we're not being heard, even by our medical care providers. And if we have somebody to sit down with us and say, okay, these are the options you actually have, these are the rights you have. And I really feel if we were in all of those spaces, then things would changed drastically.
Absolutely.
I've seen so much change in the last 4 years since starting Birthmark. People are starting to listen. People are starting to see the benefits of having an advocate and a support person who is knowledgeable in those spaces, not to replace your own support people, not to replace your own family, your own partners, your own people, but to be there as a support to everybody involved, everybody you want to have involved. And for medical care providers to notice how much that can help them, especially coming out at the other end of the pandemic, of the pressure that can be taken off of them, but also to help educate them. A lot of medical care providers went to school a very long time ago, or even with the trainings they don't have the specific training around, especially perinatal mental health. They really don't. It is like a 3-hour part of their program or a day or two, and that is not enough. No. That is not enough. It has to be a huge chunk of their education, and they're going out there in the medical field not even understanding the implications that it has on birthing people and people whose bodies can have babies, and then their loved ones and their support people.
Absolutely, such big impacts. I see that on like afterwards as a therapist. When people come to me looking for support, and then I hear the things that their healthcare providers have told them about perinatal mental health, and I'm like, oh boy,
yes.
Or they waited so long to come and get support because their healthcare provider didn't ask questions, didn't pick up on it, or told them it's okay, get more sleep, and you're fine. And then they're not fine.
They're not. And even if they get the sleep, they're not fine. No. Or how do they get the sleep? How are you helping your patient figure out ways to get the sleep?
Exactly.
I'm just like, go get sleep. Okay. Eat more. Okay.
Sure.
But if I don't have the resources to eat more or get more sleep, then it's never going to happen. So having a doula, like being able, let's figure out a plan.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Here, let's plan this out. What is postpartum going to look like? What is this time period going to look? What do you have in place? And figuring out those pieces so they're not panicking or in that moment and not knowing what to do.
Absolutely. And doing that prenatally, not just like you've given birth and now what? Let's talk about it.
Here's all these papers I want you to read.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's some websites. Like, how about the folks that are neurodiverse or have a different understanding of our language, or don't have access to devices that can give them this information? Exactly. Like, we need to think about this as an individualized approach. Absolutely. And really focus. If we put the people who have the most barriers and are the most oppressed at the forefront and think, okay, this is what these folks need, and leave that bar, right? Now, everybody else that doesn't have, everybody will be taken care of.
Absolutely.
So always putting the most oppressed and the folks who need the most support at the number one. And then if we have services for them, everybody else will get the services they need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gillian, so much for the work that you have done and continue to do in this community. It's incredible. And
thank you.
I would love to encourage anyone who's listening to check out your services. Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario, we are a referring agency now, so I'm very excited. So if anyone feels like they could benefit from accessing your services, we can help with that referral process to make it nice and smooth. And check out Birthmark services in Toronto and Hamilton. I will post all the information on the website in the show notes. And where can people find you online?
So we're at birthmarksupport.com. And just to let you know, even if you don't qualify for our doula services, a lot of our programs and services are pay what you can. So if you use our services, it means if you pay what you can, that is going to then support another family and support another person. So we want to share this knowledge, and we want everybody to feel supported. So all of that's there on our website. We're also, we have Instagram and Facebook. I'm not good at those things. I have a wonderful team who is, and watch out for us, because over the next few months, you'll probably be seeing a lot more of us around.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much, Gillian, for being on the podcast and for sharing all about the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine. I really appreciate it.
In this episode, Gillian really broke down the deep impacts that the pandemic has had on birthing parents. Gillian shared with us what doula support looks like and how doulas at Birthmark support their clients who are birthing babies. And Gillian provided their insight about gaps in mental health services in Ontario and the advocacy work they do to try and fill these gaps in services. You can find Gillian on Instagram and Facebook at gillian.doula.cullen and on LinkedIn, Gillian Cullen. Birthmark's website is birthmarksupport.com, and you can donate to Birthmark at birthmarksupport.com/donate. You can also find them on Instagram and Facebook at Birthmark Support. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know what you thought about today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.